Welcome to Columbros, the podcast where bros talk about Columbo. It's our Columbo rewatch podcast, and on this episode we have The Most Crucial Game, starring, of course, Peter Falk as Lieutenant Columbo, and Bad Bobby Culp is back, as they call him on Columbo File, as Paul Hanlon this time. This is the first time we've seen the same actor from a previous show who played a killer play a killer again, right?
He's got a mustache this time, Jeff.
Of course, excuse me. I should have made that clear up front. And this is not the last time we'll see that, right? There's a handful of times where this happens.
It's the last time we see Robert Culp.
Yeah,
but yeah, I think there's a few who do at least two, absolutely.
They clearly really liked him. I really liked him in that first Bobby Culp episode. I'm glad that he's back. Yeah. It was kind of very fun.
He's the angry private investigator, and Robert Culp's very good at people who clearly have short tempers. You know what? I just realized now when getting ready for this, Robert Culp is the voice of of the bad guy from Half-Life 2. Like the guy on the video when you walk in talking about City
no
17.
Idea. That's crazy.
That was Robert Culp.
That's amazing.
That guy's great.
Holy moly.
So, Robert Culp rules. He's obviously famous for that spy show he did with Bill Cosby back then. He was also on the Great American Hero. That song, the theme song. I can never get out of my look at what's happened to me. Believe it or not, I'm walking on air. I like the way he says air. It's air.
He pronounces both vowels in there, like real hard.
Yeah. So yeah, Robert Culp rules. He is always fantastic, and he's great in this one.
He is a lot of fun. He's some very memorable costumes and stuff. There's a lot to talk about here. Dean Stockwell from not Jumping Flash, Quantum Leap.
Oh,
Quantum Leap. Yep, he's in there.
I got so excited he showed up. I was a big Trekkie, right?
Sure.
And once Enterprise came out, Scott Bakula, then I was like, oh, everyone's like, oh, he's from Quantum Leap. I'll go watch that. Quantum Leap is good stuff.
Yep.
That is a great show. Yeah, Dean Stockwell. It's fun. They even brought Dean Stockwell in on an episode of Star Trek Enterprise, right? Because he has such a relationship with Scott Bakula. So Dean Stockwell just an incredible character actor.
Yep, absolutely. I always loved Dean Stockwell. Yeah, Quantum Leap for me was like, as a kid who was into sci-fi stuff, the pickings were slim on TV for a while, and it's like, well, Quantum Leap's great. I have to watch this. It almost felt compulsory at a certain point.
That's not a good theme song.
Yeah, it really is. Yes, a lot of great characters in this episode. A lot of great acting. I'm going to try something here. Here's the summary. So you have a framework for the story, and then we'll actually go beat by beat, and we'll do the notes as we have in the past here. But here's the summary of what happens in this episode. Paul Hanlon, the general manager of the LA Rockets, harbors ill intentions towards his young boss, Eric Wagner, and devises a plan to eliminate him. Hanlon lures Wagner into a vulnerable position by ordering him to swim, then disguises himself as an ice cream vendor to sneak into Wagner's estate. Hanlon murders Wagner by striking him with a block of ice, leaving him to drown in the pool. He then tries to establish an alibi by faking phone calls and manipulating evidence. And I'm stop there. We'll go over the kill real quick there, like that. Now we'll go beat by beat. So, Los Angeles, as always, and you know it this time because we're at the LA Coliseum, and then they yell, "Welcome to professional football." Now, not the NFL. Me too. Yeah. You noticed that too? Yeah.
Yeah, welcome to generic football. You said the LA Rockets. I don't even know if I ever picked up that there was a team name. Maybe they said that.
They say Rockets earlier in the episode a couple times, and then I don't think they ever say it again. I don't think they want you to think of. I think they want you to think of. Back then, what would it have been? Was it the Rams back then, and they left and came back?
Charge? I don't know. Yeah. Chargers, Rams. I don't know. I have no idea. I was a Toledo Rocket for one semester.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. LA Memorial Coliseum, though, very historic venue that was built in the 1920s for the Olympics. It was used for Olympics again in the 1980s. It's still the home of the University of Southern California Trojans. So I believe the Trojans still play there. It's still there. It's like a historic venue now. So LA is as much a character a lot of times as anything else in these shows. In like 70s LA, it's a very specific feel. Just like how it was fun when we saw the Hollywood Bowl in a previous episode, it is fun to see the Coliseum here.
Yes, and the Coliseum still to this day one of the four major stadiums in Los Angeles. Obviously, there's SoFi Stadium. I think it's like the big new one, stuff like that. But if you're like a big musical act, you could very well end up playing at the Memorial Coliseum. Anyway, we have Paul Hanlon, who is the general manager of the LA Rockets. he is heading into the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum to watch some of that professional football. And he goes into his office and quickly talks to his assistant. He kind of goes back and forth with his assistant a little bit and mentions Eric Wagner, who owns the team, but football is not his game. So he is there by himself, Paul Hanlon, to watch the game. He tips his assistant and tells him leave and to leave me alone and to lock the door on the way out. We are already establishing quite a lot here.
That's always the Columbo sign, like, oh, I don't need you today, actually.
Yeah,
because I'm going to murder somebody.
got a little killing to do. Yeah, you don't want that on your hands. When the assistant leaves, Hanlon immediately gets on the phone to call Eric Wagner. Wagner is the aforementioned Dean Stockwell. He is still in bed. And this immediately sets off Hanlon, who says, of all days, and you are alone, aren't you? So again, we are getting information that's going to be important for us to know. He is establishing things that he needs to know. And the fun double side of all days, well, he's putting on airs with Eric Wagner that they need to go to Montreal to buy a hockey team later. So of all days, you're doing this. But of course, what he really means is, of all days, I need you in the pool because that's where some killing's going to be happening. Wagner has to check, but he is alone. No one's there. He has to sort of groggily look around his bedroom to see if there's any ladies still there. Hanlon tells him to get up, get some coffee, and get out to the pool. And at this point, I'm like, wait, why is he telling him, get in the pool? I was kind of confused. I'm like, why is this man yelling at this other man to go swimming? That's a fun thing to do.
Gosh,
why are you mad about
it? Is it
it?
Now where Dean Stockwell's character is laying on that dry pool slide hungover and stuff. It's so great.
Yeah, he'll be there in a second. They at this point, he's still in bed. Wagner says he'll do what he wants, even though Hanlon insists it's an emergency and they need to get on a flight at 6:30 a.m. to Montreal to buy a hockey team. Wagner hems and haws, and Hanlon yells at him again to go get a workout at the pool. And I think at this point he is on that laying by the pool because Hanlon doesn't want Wagner daydreaming when they get to Canada, which is the real reason he wants him in there, or the ostensible reason, the fake real reason. Hanlon says he's doing this all for Wagner's dad, who only ever wanted to build the world's largest sports empire. Wagner hates hearing about this, but Wagner hears the loud radio that Hanlon has playing in the background and notes that Hanlon must be at the game and that Hanlon, is taking care of things. Mike, real quick, I want to stop here and talk to you. Did you ever get a good sense or a strong sense of Hanlon's motivation for the killing, other than he just seems to be frustrated by Wagner?
He seems frustrated by Wagner, and there's something here where Wagner's father was a very respected sports figure and owner of these teams. And then the son is a bit of, a layabout, a womanizer, not taking any of it seriously. So I forget if it's kind of established that Paul Hanlon would get full ownership of things like the football team if Eric Wagner is out of the picture. That's kind of just what I assumed would happen, and that was the motivation.
Right. I think they established this a little bit later when we meet this character in a little bit, that maybe Shirley Wagner will get it. But he seems very close to Shirley Wagner, not necessarily in that way, but they have a close relationship in that she really trusts Paul Hanlon. So he would get less interference and he would work with someone that he seems to respect more than Eric. It just was, in so many of these episodes, the motivation was so important. And here that seemed a little bit downplayed, maybe because they didn't have something super strong. I will say that once the episode really started to get going, I wasn't thinking about that too much. I think a lot of that is down to Robert Culp being so fun to watch do these things.
Yeah, I mean, Paul Hanlon is almost as close to almost a cartoon character villain that we get in these things. There are some great shots of him later on.
Yep. They hang up and Wagner does start to stir. Hanlon, meanwhile, calls down to the locker room to provoke the head coach, clearly deliberately. Hanlon says he wants to see Coach Rizzo at halftime to fix his game plan. And then Hanlon follows up with, I'll make your decisions for you, saying that to Coach Rizzo. All the while, Hanlon is changing his clothes. We get to see him sort of begin to unbutton and get into some other costume. While this is happening as well, we cut to the game starting. It's exactly 2 p.m., and Hanlon is dressing up as a concession worker with a little hat and tray and everything. I think we learned later.
His freaking hat.
It's a dingling ice cream, the concession worker who they also have cars.
Ice cream truck with this little soda fountain hat. He looks like a man who's about to go and kill somebody.
He's like a man who doesn't want you to know he's about to kill someone, but clearly is.
And he's got his sunglasses. There's this one picture. If you look at the Columbo file, God bless you, Columbo file.
Yep, as always.
summary of this episode. The picture of Robert Culp in his ice cream man outfit. Oh, it should be framed.
Yes,
it's beautiful.
It is like the best, like sort of disguise in the show we've seen so far. We haven't seen a ton of disguises, but honestly, even just like beyond that, as a costume on this show, it's very memorable. It stands out so much. Little bow tie. He's wearing the sunglasses is what brings it together for me, where it's like this will stop anyone from noticing. And honestly, I think if I knew Robert Culp and then I saw that man walking down the hallway, I would be just so like, there's no way that's the same person. That's not Robert. That's not him.
The way his mustache makes it look like he is perpetually frowning.
Yes. It's a really good image. It's quite fantastic. So yes, he's getting disguised. He uses the disguise and the national anthem, because everyone's sort of like looking out to the field and saluting or putting their hand on their heart to help him sneak out without being noticed. Let's see here, and he gets past everyone in the stands and out of the vendors only entrance undetected, where he's able to get into that ding-a-ling mobile. And at the same time, let's see, the head coach, the assistant, and Wagner all think he is upstairs in his office box because they just either talked to them or they saw him and then locked the door behind them and they don't see it open and all that stuff. So everyone thinks he's upstairs. He's got somewhat of an alibi so far. On his drive, Hanlon stops at a payphone and he calls Wagner again, but the line is busy, so he's got to wait a little bit. Hanlon is ordering the hair of the dog plus some extra drinks for travel, so he's ordering some drinks to be delivered to him. Eventually, the line freezes and Hanlon is able to get through. He holds a handheld radio up near the phone, so it still sounds like he's at the game. And Hanlon suggests taking one car and that Wagner should get in the pool. Like Hanlon's like, "Hey, I'll come pick you up. Let's drive there together." Wagner is still annoyed, but he relents and says, "Fine, I'll be ready at 5:30. Come pick me up." This is exactly what Hanlon wants to hear. Everything is kind of going good. He hurries back into his vehicle, which is that ice cream truck, and a little girl yells at him to say, "Hey, stop, can I get some ice cream?" But Hanlon ignores her, and I really like the ADR for the young girl, because that was a grown woman doing a little girl's voice.
Absolutely was, wasn't it? "Hey, mister, I want some ice cream."
Exactly. It had like a weird accent. Yeah, it was quite unbelievable. I enjoyed it a lot. Hanlon drives up to what looks like that. You know, in La La Land. Have you ever seen La La Land?
Oh, I've seen La La Land.
Yeah, you know, like where they first like do their song and dance up on the Hollywood Hills. It looks like that's where he's driving. Honestly, it might be the same place. For as much as I'm aware of LA, that seemed like where they were at. Anyway, he parks the ice cream truck there. And he goes up some steps and kind of goes up to like where Wagner is obviously swimming, and Hanlon walks by the pool, and Wagner looks up, sees him, he's like, "Paul, what are you doing here?" And Hanlon doesn't say anything, and of course he is hiding something behind his back, and we saw him previously reach in the back of the ice cream truck and get something. Probably an ice block. He holds it up. It is clearly just a block of ice. He slams Eric Wagner on the head with it, drops it in the pool, so the ice will just melt and no one will ever find a murder weapon.
That's how I'd kill you, I think. I'd use the ice.
I would expect nothing less from you. That's definitely the right move. And it is, Paul doesn't say anything. He just starts to walk away, and he notices that he's left some footprints in the water, because he stepped in some water from the pool, and you could see his footprints come right up next to the pool. So he grabs a hose and he sprays all of the footprints away, and then he dips. And that is our kill. He does still have to get back to the place, though, and I really like this. On the way back, we're cutting back and forth between the football game, and he's feeling pretty good, but like he's still a little nervous. But he has time to grab a popsicle and eat it on the way back, which is just a great look.
The shot of him in the dingling ice cream truck eating ice cream after he just killed a man he's known since he was a child. And he's just fucking eating ice cream, Jeff. It's almost too much, but I love it.
Yes, exactly. It's like, it really has to put you in a place with this character of like, oh, this is who this guy is. Okay. I think that's when I gave up. I'm like, anytime I started thinking about the motivation, I started remembering that shot, and I'm like, okay, I forget who we're dealing with. We're dealing with the guy that's going to eat the popsicle on the drive back. The first half is ending as he's getting back. Like, this is clearly important. Like, he is like looking at his watch while also eating the popsicle. And we actually see the coach climbing up the stairs to meet with Hanlon. But Hanlon isn't in the box when he enters the room. The coach is looking around, trying to find him. It looks like he might even be ready to leave. And right then, Hanlon comes out of the bathroom adjusting his shirt. We know he just changed out of the Dingling ice cream costume and back into his clothes. And he's like kind of fixing his sleeve or whatever. But Coach Rizzo doesn't really think much of that. Coach Rizzo is ready to get into a fight with Hanlon because they were going at it on the call earlier.
Right, he's telling him how to run his team.
Telling him how to run his team. And he's like, all right, let's go 15 rounds right now while we have a couple of minutes. And Hanlon immediately is like, you know what? Never mind. I would have called some different plays, but I can't do everyone's job for you, so I'm going to let you run the team the way we discussed the previous night. And Coach Rizzo was like, okay, and then just leaves. And that is basically the whole plot, his murder plot, completed. He is now returned. He's got people that thought he was there at the beginning of the game, know he was there at halftime, and he believes he is now fully covered. Obviously there's a gap in there. How we will explain that, we'll discover a little bit later. How'd you feel about this kill?
Like I said, it's goofy. It's kind of fun. Robert Culp is just hilarious as like this, like I said, a cartoon character villain, right? Eating the ice cream on that truck back just absolutely cements it. He's I guess in a dark way, you say a psychopath, but he's like, twirling his mustache pretty much.
Exactly. And I just, I also like the football background and all that stuff that was kind of happening.
Sure.
They just do a good job with all that. And then, yeah.
And you can see like where maybe there's going to be some holes, having to wash away his footprints. And it's kind of an important fact, right? So, he like, oh, I'm not actually mad at you, coach, or whatever. But they're not doing great in that first half. And that's going to kind of come back to bite him. It's like, well, you cooled down because they had a bad first half? That seems kind of weird.
Yep, exactly. All right. Cut to Columbo smoking a cigar and listening to the football game in his car. A blue car policeman comes by to tell Columbo, hey, the coroner is here, has already seen the body, already has some ideas about what happened, and they're ready to leave and get out of here. They're just waiting for you to give approval to let the body be released. A liquor delivery boy discovered the body in the pool at 2:50 p.m., fished it out, tried to resuscitate it with the help of the neighbors, couldn't do anything. And the coroner's annoyed because he's got guests at home, and Columbo's kind of coming in late. He's like, I was kind of out there listening to the football game, and I was at home. My wife's getting a haircut or something like that.
Sunday, come on. It's the Lord's Day for Columbo.
That's right. But yeah, they kind of get into it. But every time they are getting into it, the game is still playing on the radio, and Columbo is doing the thing where he's like, yeah, and then any sort of excitement happens on the radio, and he's immediately like tuned out, like running back over to the radio and listening to what's happening, which is a bit I liked quite a bit as well. So, yeah, Columbo wants to know what happened here still, though. So he wants to kind of get everybody to give him some information, including the coroner, including there's another detective there. And the coroner's annoyed by this as well and says it was a false alarm, Lieutenant. Look at the water. He must have been diving and he slipped on the board, and that knocked him unconscious. And then Columbo points out, well, there's water around the steps, too. It could be over there. And the coroner again's like, why does it matter? He was knocked out and he drowned. I've seen it 1,000 times. But, of course, as a routine, the coroner says, well, I'm going to do an autopsy. We have to do an autopsy. That's going to happen. So just any questions you might have, just relax. I'll get you some answers. Columbo does want to talk to everyone, though, who was at the house. But there weren't any people at the house. The only people that came by were the delivery boy and the neighbor. Columbo does go out to check out the pool. As he does, he gets a little water, like on his hand and on his pants. And he's like annoyed, and he's kind of moving between the very steps, like the step that leads down into the pool and sort of the cement behind him that has a bunch of water on it as well. And he like kind of is adjusting himself, and he seems to like recognize something or notice something. And so he has his hand in the water that is on the deck, and he kind of brings it up and he like smells it a little bit and then tastes it. And then he goes and compares that to the taste of the pool water. And it seems to confirm his hunch that he had from smelling things, that the water up on the deck is fresh water with no chlorine in it. And then the pool water is highly chlorinated and has that different taste because of that, very chemically taste. You could notice the difference of that by just tasting it. And I think this is going to be a theme of this episode, Mike, of Columbo being very observant in this episode to like maybe the most extreme degree that we've seen so far in some cases. What do you think?
Right, yeah, because there aren't a whole lot of holes actually in Cobb's plan here. It's relatively well done as far as murder plots go. And yeah, like this is kind of that one thing. And, you could see why Wagner wouldn't think like, oh, somebody's going to notice that this is fresh water, not chlorinated water. No, it's just water. Who would care about a detail like that? But Columbo notices. Is what immediately makes him the only person who thinks that this isn't just some, hungover rich boy, concussing himself and drowning in the pool.
The other detective comes by to talk with Columbo. This is Sergeant Clemens, who mentions there was quite a party the night before at Wagner's. Wagner's wife was out of town, so maybe Wagner let the servants go, and that's why there was no one at the house. And basically, the Sergeant Clemens is like, you know what I'm saying. This is Eric Wagner. And Columbo takes him a second, but he puts two and two together. This is the son of the Wagner who owned the LA Rockets. And he tells Clemens, okay, basically, and this is all still based on the hunch from what happened with the pool water, but get full statements from the neighbors and the delivery boy, and get fingerprints with the entire team on site. So basically, we're going to get an autopsy, and we're going to get the full lab treatment. The lab crew is going to come by and run over the place and get some more answers for Columbo. The Sergeant Clemens is like, okay, well, what are you going to do if you're putting me in charge of this? And Columbo's like, I need to get to the football game. Columbo shows up to Paul Hanlon's box and knocks on the door. No one answers. Columbo goes in anyhow. And he tells Hanlon that Wagner is dead. Wagner has a pretty good poker face here. Culp plays this pretty well. But like a lot of these killers, he does also immediately go into the lane of the groundwork for his alibi and an explanation that might satisfy Columbo. So Hanlon just talked to Wagner a couple of hours ago. He talked to him from the box. Like, I had a call here, so maybe we'll be able to confirm that. And then also, Wagner is an excellent swimmer, but he was alone and by the pool. So, I mean, come on, what happened? He was alone and by a pool. He must have just been an accident. Columbo says he won't bother him with questions, except for he will bother him with a question. He says, it looks like Wagner had a party, but Hanlon says that's none of our business. Neither of us should care about that. And then Columbo asks about a Sunday pool service, but Hanlon says, I don't think there's any pool service that does any work on a Sunday. And then that's when Columbo shares, well, there was fresh water around the pool with no chlorine in it. Hanlon completely no-sells this. He ignores this completely. He says, okay, so we're talking about an accident. And Hanlon switches off the game radio, and Columbo ignores that, because this is right when they're beginning to really talk about, hey, this could be something more than an accident. But Hanlon's like, oh, he's talking about something else. So it was an accident. And he turns off the radio. Previously, he had just turned down the volume. Now he turns it fully off, and he's ready to engage fully with Columbo. This is another moment where Columbo seems to really notice something here, and that super observational skill comes into play. That doesn't pay off right in this moment, but it's something that's going to pay off later. But it is something I noticed at the time, and he did as well. Let's see here. It looked like an accident, but the hose could have hid something. But that's my problem, says Columbo. And Columbo walks out and goes to see Coach Rizzo and tells him the bad news. Coach Rizzo says, poor boy, he never did anything right according to his father's standards. But he sowed his wild oats. But that does not mean that he was particularly more scandalous than any other rich kid. No, he can't imagine anyone wanting Eric dead or wanting to see Eric dead. That's another moment where I was like, what was the motivation? You just and honestly, this might be the first time where we are dealing with someone who's just a megalomaniacal sociopath.
Yeah, that would be it. And it's we're talking with Rizzo, where Rizzo's talking about I saw him. I went up there, and he wanted to yell at me, but then all of a sudden he's like, "I was fine with it." And Columbo, he says, "Gee, I didn't think we did that good during the first half." Mm-hmm. No offense, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah, yep, right. And that's going to be important as well. We from here we cut to the Wagner residence. Flowers are arriving. Hanlon's assistant is handling things at the house, and she seems overwhelmed. And we find out it's because she's pretty new. She's coming in and help. She previously worked for Hanlon, and she was just kind of trying to take over here and help with the arrival of the flowers and the funeral planning, things like that. Wagner's lawyer, meanwhile, also arrives to see Hanlon. This is Walter Cunnell. Thank you. Yes, Walter Cunnell. But Wagner's Hanlon is not available to see him. In the back, Columbo, meanwhile, is arriving on the scene. He's helping carrying in flowers. The secretary's basically like, you can leave. And he's like, oh, no, I'm a cop. I was just helping bring in flowers. Pretty funny, as always. He's trying to see Hanlon, but he doesn't mind waiting. And so him and Walter are both kind of standing off to the side. And a fun little bit happens here where previously, when he was investigating the crime scene and he was smelling the water, Columbo stepped in a bit too much water, and he says it ruined his shoes. So he asks Walter, hey, how much are those shoes you're wearing? I want to get me a pair of that, just like that. And he's like, well, do you have any of the guys? Like, it's $60. And Columbo goes, oh, well, do you know where I can get those for like $16 or $17? Because no. And apparently this was an ad lib from Peter Falk, right?
Yeah. This is an ad lib. Falk's kind of like to do this, and people would kind of keep them off balance, sort of keep things a little bit interesting there. So this is, a bit of a famous moment from the show, and it becomes a reoccurring gag even throughout this episode. But it's such a Columbo moment, right? His one nice pair of shoes. He's like, right now, do you get new shoes? And he has no shame telling people like, I want nice shoes, but I want them real cheap.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't even occur to him how people are like, okay, yeah, of course you want it for cheap. He's like, oh, well, I guess I'll just have to keep looking for shoes then. Let's see here. Mr. Rakowski, I think that's how you say that, calls, and Hanlon says he's too busy for any calls today, and he's very, very adamant about that. Then while this is happening, though, these phone calls keep coming in, and Columbo's standing over by a stereo system, and he's like, what the hell? He notices something again. He hears something. This was something that's like, if you were listen, or if you were observant, you would definitely hear this low level dial tone sound that was coming through the stereo anytime a call did happen. And he keeps trying to adjust things. And he's trying to figure out what's going on there. It goes away. It comes back when another call happens. This time the call is for Columbo, and it's basically the lab calling in and the autopsy calling in, being like, we ain't got shit. There's nothing here. Everything looks pretty normal. It looks like he got hit on the head and he drowned, and we have nothing else to go on. While he's sort of repeating this on the phone, he does notice that Hanlon is not really caring or listening to any of this shit. Doesn't seem too interested. Hanlon does, though, stand up after signing something and is like, I need to get out of here. I need to go work on. I got more funeral prep to work on. I'm heading out of here. And Columbo kind of notices that as well. And he kind of files that away, but he just leaves, and then Columbo follows him as well. Do we get anything else from Walter here? I'm trying to see here in my notes.
From Walter, I mean, it's clear that Walter it doesn't get along with Hanlon,
that's right?
So that's pretty clear. So
they had a back and forth, right? Yeah, they kind of were kind of jabbing one another verbally a little bit,
right? And Walter seems, pretty protective of Mrs. Wagner, also from Shirley Wagner. We get that here.
Right. Yep. Okay. Yes. And then Walter's like, autopsy lab crews. What the hell? Why? What is all this about? And then Columbo says, "Damn, just part of a routine murder investigation." So Columbo just put it on the table for everybody there that's still listening. At this point, it is no longer Hanlon, but Columbo's just like, "Yep, I am investigating a murder," and then he walks out right behind Hanlon. We cut to a plane landing at LAX, and I knew that because it had that UFO-looking restaurant thing. I'm like, oh yeah.
That's it. I always get sad every time I go to LAX, which has been quite often lately. I'm like, there's nothing in there really anymore. It's like this iconic, weird UFO building. You can almost see the storage stuff just kind of laying about in there. It's a shame. I guess not too many people would go to LAX just to go to some weird restaurant because it'd be very inconvenient to get to it.
Yep.
But I wish I could do something fun with that.
Yeah, LAX is a real pain in the ass to get to now.
Sure is.
So Columbo is also arriving at LAX by car. Columbo looks around until he finds a Yellow Pages or something, a telephone bank, and we realize, oh, look, Paul Hanlon is in one of those telephone booths, making a call, and he sees Columbo, and he hangs up. He says, I can't talk right now. I'll call you later. He jumps out to ask Columbo, are you following me? And Columbo says,
he's mad.
Yep, he's getting off kilter already. Columbo's like, it just seems like a funny place to make funeral arrangements. So Hanlon doesn't answer that. He storms off. Columbo follows him and says, it's weird you were on the phone. Didn't you just tell your secretary you were too busy to talk? Hanlon says, I was calling off a meeting in Montreal that I forgot about. I don't know why I forgot about it, being like, my friend just died. Of course I'm forgetting about things like that. Hanlon admits he is meeting Mrs. Wagner's plane in just a few minutes. He chartered a flight for her, but he couldn't talk about it back at the house with Walter Kuhnel around. He doesn't want him getting involved. And Columbo's like, oh, I get it. But since we are talking, I just want to know a little bit more about the Wagner's marriage, with that suggestive party and all. And Hanlon says that Wagner was like a little brother to him, but Hanlon could never straighten him out. Shirley understood that later on. She was way out of his class, but she couldn't break it off with him. She did love him. Columbo wondered why Hanlon didn't ask about the lab report as well back at the place. Hanlon says that he wasn't interested because he knew it would reveal nothing, because it was an accident. And if it wasn't an accident, it was some hippie girl he's been shacking up with that did it. But Columbo's team tracked down every girl from the party, and there are no leads there at all, according to Columbo. So we'll just have to look for someone else. And then Hanlon's like, what does that mean? And then Columbo drops a tiny little bombshell on him. There was a little girl who noticed an ice cream man who was driving around the area in his ice cream truck, and the neighbor girl told her parents. The parents told the police, and I've been looking into it. And I called the ice cream company, and they don't service that area at all. So that's just a little loose end that I need to tie up. And Hanlon at this point is beginning to get a little bit like, okay, this guy's on my case, but he doesn't really seem to have too many answers for him at this point. All right, let's see here. Ice cream man. Yep. Okay. Also, I called Eric from the box. This is important that Hanlon is okay. He's realizing, and Columbus explicitly stating at this point, look, bad news. You're going to have to provide more for your alibi, more confirmation for your alibi. Sure, you talk to the assistant. Sure, you talk to the guy, to the coach at halftime. But in that period where 2:30 happened, where we think the guy was killed, where we think Eric Wagner was killed, did anybody see you confirmed? And Paul says, well, I called him from the box, like just before he died, like at the end of the right before the end of the first quarter. And Columbo says, unfortunately, the telephone company cannot corroborate that. Not that it's like that call doesn't exist, just they aren't able to have that, like to file calls in that way at that time. And then this is where Hanlon really snaps. He says, but that's not my problem. And then Columbo's like very calmly, like, you're right, that's my problem. And as in, like, I am, like, this is my number one concern now, and I am on the case.
It's always interesting when, like, you've seen the kid just get really mad, worked up, and Columbo's still just keeping his normal Columbo cool.
Yep, and it's a famous cool, which we will eventually see him break a couple of times, which does make him make it very interesting when that does happen. But I think he feels like he has a pretty good grasp on this one at this point. He's just kind of waiting for that one break in the alibi. Because it hasn't broken one way or the other. It's still just kind of nebulous without any answer to it. Let's see here. We are... okay, yep. She lands. The wife lands. Just then, Shirley Wagner shows up kind of as they're having this little spat. Hanlon takes her home and tells Columbo not to bother her. So instead, we cut to a man is poking around the Wagner pool at night with a flashlight. First, it's like, wait, who is this? Is this Columbo? What's going on here?
Yeah, hey, what's going on here? What is this weird little twist?
Yeah, it's not Columbo. The guy pets the dog, then uses a credit card to slip past the exterior door of the house. He is breaking and entering. He then goes into the office, the one that the secretary was using earlier to do like some of those phone calls and accept the flowers and stuff like that. We recognize that. But as he begins to mess with the phones, seems like he's trying to get bugs out of the phones. We kind of like have the camera slide over a little bit, and who's sitting in the chair? It's none other than Columbo himself. Columbo is waiting for him, and it's like, hey, buddy, what's going on? What are you up to?
And what's going on here?
Yeah, what's going on here? We find out that this is a private detective with a license. That doesn't mean he's not breaking and entering, though. He is still doing stuff that is illegal. He's not allowed to do that as a private detective. And Columbo's like, you know what? You know why I'm here? Like, you know how I figured out to be waiting here for someone to come by? The radio, the dial tone sound earlier. That gave you away. You installed these bugs incorrectly. It happens all the time. It can happen to any of us. But I knew someone was going to come back to get him, so I've been kind of staking the place out. And the private detective is like, okay, all right, fine. You kind of got me. But when Columbo asks for the key information, who paid you to place these bugs? The detective's a little bit more hesitant about that, and Columbo kind of decides to maybe play a little bit of hardball at this point and be like, well, your license and your equipment, I might need to borrow this stuff for a little bit. And he's like, so I think you're probably going to tell me what I need to know. And it seems clear that does happen, but it happens off camera. And he also threatens him with making him an accessory to murder, which also like sweetens the deal for him to get the information he wants from his private detective.
Let's rat him out.
Once again, we cut to a Columbo at a local YMCA basketball court or something like that. But these are professional basketball players playing a scrimmage, and Hanlon is there, and it looks like he's trying to find players for the basketball team that is also part of this sports empire. It's not just a football team. The Wagners owned multiple sports teams. That's why they were going to buy a hockey team. These must have been
like players of the day, because they kind of like make a point of like, look, it's so and so and Beardy Man, right? And it's like there's like a little cutaway to them, like, okay, these were probably Lakers or something.
Clippers,
at the
maybe.
Time.
Yeah.
Maybe they only got Clippers. I don't know.
Yeah, I got that sense as well. Though it's like these must have been famous players from the time. So Hanlon's there, and he gets a call about Columbo showing up at his office with a search warrant. Columbo says, and Columbo, of course, is there. So he like kind of interrupts him a little bit and says, Wagner's phones were bugged. And so we got a search warrant to check out your place to see what's going on there. And it turns out that your phones were also bugged by the same exact person with the same kind of bugs. So we know that it wasn't you that did it. At first, I thought it was you, but it turns out it wasn't. It was you guys were both being bugged by the same person. Do you want to know who it is? Columbo wants Hanlon to meet the person who hired the private eye. He has the tapes of all their conversations for the last 2 weeks, and it is, of course, the lawyer Walter Cunnell from earlier. Walter and Paul bicker and threaten to sue each other. They're like, "Oh, you bugged my phones, go blah blah." And Walter's like, "Ah, yeah, I was just doing it because it's the right thing or whatever." Columbo wants them to go inside because Miss Wagner is waiting. This also annoys Hanlon because he's like, "Hey, you weren't supposed to bother her," but Walter said he insisted. Walter is kind of a family lawyer. He insisted because he wanted everybody to hear the tapes at the same time all together, so that it was kind of all out in the open and no one could hide anything. As they're walking in, though, Columbo says he has some bad news. The ice cream company services the stadium. So this makes it even more important for Hanlon to find a way to confirm his alibi, because now there's more of a suggestion that he would have an easy way to get there and get back.
It's Columbo was always like, well, it's a possibility that you disguised yourself as an ice cream man and then drove this ice cream truck over there.
Like, I know that would be absurd, but
it would be insane, but it might have happened. You have to prove it didn't.
Yes, exactly. Let's see. They go in, they listen to the tapes. One has Wagner thanking Hanlon for turning him on to that chick. Walter says that is Hanlon trying to stir shit and stuff like that. The other tape is Hanlon yelling at Wagner to get ready and confirming a pickup time for the airport. That's like the last call, the one he made from the road while he was dressed up as an ice cream truck driver. The private eye says that call happened at, I wrote 5:29 p.m. That's probably, no, maybe it was 5:29 p.m. And maybe, actually, I think it was 2:29 p.m. And Eric died at 2:30 p.m., according to Columbo. So there is the loose end tied up. And he thanks Walter, basically saying, "Walter, I should thank you. You just confirmed my alibi."
Convenient.
Yeah, very convenient. Worked out very well. In fact, Hanlon's like, maybe we should go in and see what happens here when you need me to confirm my alibi. Well, let's go see what happens on the tapes. Let's see. Hanlon explains to Shirley that Walter has been getting Columbo to believe that Hanlon killed Eric. Shirley seems very sad and upset and tells everyone to get out after shouting at Walter for being a piece of shit and being jealous of Paul Hanlon. And she's talking to everybody except for Paul. So Hanlon gets to stay by with her. And then Columbo's like, well, he's like, Shirley, there's still a lot of investigating to do. And she basically hisses at him to go away. Yep. And Columbo's all like, well, darn, this is rough. I have definitely lost this round.
Yeah, exactly. And this happens sometimes with Columbo where, like the killer kind of gets a sort of key person on their side instead of Columbo's side.
Right. And it's like you never necessarily know which way it's going to go. It's not like the show's formulaic in that way where, well, Columbo does this and then he gets that person and then this happens. It's like it could break either way and Columbo has to find a new way to solve this case.
And sometimes you got to forget, like, it's creepy and unsettling. Like, oh, this is the guy that just murdered her husband, actually, right?
Exactly,
like, he's won her over.
Yep. All right, now we're cutting to Oceanside East Cafe on the water. Columbo is waiting to meet that private dick from earlier, and he's been listening to that last call, and apparently he's been listening to it over and over. He thinks it's weird that Hanlon called right when his team got called for pass interference on the 2-yard line, and the private eye's like, look, man, I don't know. I guess it's kind of weird. Whatever. Why don't you find another suspect? Columbo wants to know how the dick planted the bugs, and he says he didn't. Someone else did, and they didn't break in or enter in that way. But the private eye needs his equipment and license back. Columbo is still stalling, though. And he's like, hey, maybe if you give me the name of the person who did this, was it the girl? Was it like a secretary or something like that? And the guy like hems and haws, and eventually is like, all right, it was Eve Babcock.
He's like, at first, he's like, hey, how much did all that equipment cost? Yes. He's like, whew, a lot of money.
Yes, $600. Like, oh, a lot of money. And the guy's like, okay, fine, I fucking get it. All right. It's Eve Babcock. She was the secretary. Not the secretary that was there earlier. That was the one that replaced Eve. But Eve Babcock was the previous secretary that was there for like 3 days, and then she got fired by Paul Hanlon. The private eye also mentions that secretary is not her main line of work, which was like, oh, then what is her main line of work? And we're about to find out.
This is our great scene.
This is a really good scene. So we cut to Eve's place, and she's waiting for Columbo. She's waiting for somebody. Their mutual friend called and said to expect him when he shows up at the door. And she says, we're going to go out to dinner. And Columbo's like, oh, ma'am, there's been some mistake. I wasn't planning on dinner. And she goes, oh, no dinner, huh? And she is pissed. She's like, oh, so you just basically thinking, oh, you just want to cut to the good stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay, I get what's going on here.
It's an escort.
Yeah, it's an escort. And she's like, well, I just wish you would have said something and told me. And Columbo was like beginning to like look amused, like, okay, how do I navigate this? And he tries to tell her that he didn't get her name from whom she thinks he did. He got it from Dobbs. Dobbs is the name of the detective. And she goes, oh, Dobbs. But right as that's happening, there is another ring on the doorbell. This is who she's actually expecting. Her guest arrives.
Goober?
Yes. A stockbroker from Cincinnati. He comes in, and Eve's like, still doesn't know who Columbo is. She still thinks that he is going to be Thursday night's escort service guest. And she's like, this is my cousin, and he was just leaving. And the guy's like, oh, well, nice to meet you. We're going to go to dinner. And Columbo's like, I'm Lieutenant Columbo from the Los Angeles Police Department. And they're both just like, and the guy's like, I was going to, those stock tips, I'll have to give them to you tomorrow. Bye. It's very good.
It's so great. Yeah. And then Babcock and you kind of like freaking out, like, oh, and then, and Cole's like, look, why don't you just, look, I'm going to take that notebook away. I'm going to pretend I never saw it.
I don't want to hurt you, he says. I thought it was a really good line. Yes.
It's like, look, I'm not here for any of that. I do not care.
Yep. So Columbo's got one main question. It's kind of the question he asked this to the private eye as well. Why did she get fired after 3 days? He's like, I don't know. It's not her main line of work. It's what the detective said. When he asks that to Eve, she's like, I don't know. Maybe my typing skills aren't good enough. But Columbo has another theory. He thinks that maybe someone offered her more money for a different job. After all, Hanlon doesn't miss much, and he certainly wouldn't miss Eve. And he's definitely implying like she's very beautiful, and she is. And maybe he noticed her planting the bugs because she's so pretty. Maybe he was keeping an eye on her, and he noticed it at that point. Eve gets upset at this, especially with Columbo insinuating things and stuff like that, and saying that she was, involved in a very serious crime. Because as far as the papers have said, Wagner's death was an accident. But she might know a little bit better because there was some shenanigans going on with Hanlon. Columbo agrees that he's getting ahead of things. He's just going to leave. Except he did notice that when she was getting upset, when he was insinuating things and she got like sort of worked up, that a little accent came out. So maybe her name, Eve Babcock, isn't like, maybe does she have another name? Like maybe Miss Rakowski, the person that called earlier and was saying that Paul Hanlon was very insistent on not talking to in front of everyone else. Anyway, she doesn't respond to that. But it's just the thought. That scene ends. We go back to the LA Coliseum Stadium. This is just a quick scene of Columbo doing some thinking, walking around. He looks down the vendor path. He sees the ice cream truck there.
Some good shots here of him in the empty Coliseum, huh?
Yes, really good. I'm glad we got this scene. It's like not moving the plot forward, but it is an opportunity to breathe and show a little bit of his process. I did appreciate that. We cut to a travel broker. Columbo wants to know if Hanlon planned a trip to Montreal for the previous Sunday. Columbo then commiserates with one of the other employees there, but not being able to find the answer to the murder mystery that he's working on. Meanwhile, this is the following Sunday, so there's another football game playing on the radio, and as he's listening to the radio, a cuckoo clock inside the office goes off, and Columbo's like, maybe I have a thought. Maybe I've had a different angle occur to me. And so that scene ends right there. Before we find out if the guy was planning anything to Montreal or whatever. That seemed to be kind of just a setup for us to actually get this answer instead. We go back to Hanlon's box. Columbo has new shoes. He's got some ice cream, and he definitely has a pep in his step. He begins talking to Hanlon.
And a new man.
Just a new man. And Hanlon he's just not even dealing with it anymore. He's annoyed right away. He turns the radio down. The play-by-play still playing, but he's just turned it down. He can hear it in the background. And Columbo notes, hey, you did the same thing last week. You turned the radio down, but not off when I told you that Eric Wagner is dead. However, when I told you about the fresh water on the decking, when I told you Eric Wagner might have been murdered, you turned the radio off. I thought I must have struck a chord. But Columbo's not really here to talk about that. What he wants to talk about is Miss Rakowski, to which Paul Hanlon responds, who? And then Columbo says, that lady that Hanlon called from the airport, or that you called from the airport. And then Hanlon gets very angry. What are you talking about? Well, Columbo gets that he needed to get out of the house to call her because Hanlon already knew the phones were bugged. And this is the key. This is everything coming together right now. Miss Rakowski will do a lot more talking about that, Columbo believes, when she finds out that this is a murder case, and it is a murder case. And right then, Paul Hanlon turns off the radio, and Columbo, so pleased with himself, right? It's oh, he did it again! He says it like that even.
It might be the best Columbo delivery yet.
Yes.
Look, he did it again.
Yeah, he doesn't even say you did it again. He goes, he did it again. Talking to himself, talking to us.
Talking to us. So look, he did it again.
Yeah, he did it again. He's and then he says, I guess you can't even help yourself.
It's so good. It's such a good moment. Look,
real choice moment. I was like, oh, I love Columbo. This is the good stuff. Anyway, all right, let's see here where we at. If you knew. Or actually, Columbo's oh, the best part's yet to come. So, yeah, you can't help yourself, blah, blah, blah. But the best part of this is yet to come. If you knew that the house was bugged, then you knew you could use those phones to set up your perfect alibi. And look, the team scored. He's pointing out, and he's pointed to Hanlon. But Hanlon isn't watching the game anymore. And Columbo wants to listen to that last call again because it happens to be the exact same time right now as they're having this conversation in his office. It's 2:29 p.m. And if they start the call right now, they could sync up this week with last week, essentially. It's post Sunday. It's a football game. There's a radio playing, there's a game happening. And so let's start the last call right now. And Hanlon's fine, whatever. So they listen to that last call again. And Columbo begins explaining what his problem has been. He's I've listened to this tape 100 times, and I was trying to hear something that didn't belong there. A dog barking, a child laughing in the background, a car honk, something that would have proved that you were not in your box office. But I think I had it backwards, and it occurred to me that I should be listening, or I should be looking for something that isn't there that should be. And Hanlon's like what? I mean, what are you talking about? What? And then I think Columbo's like a noise or something. And Hanlon says, "What noise?" And Columbo basically just kind of pauses a little bit, and then bam, chimes go off right at 2:30 as the clock in Hanlon's box. Strikes 2:30 and just has those small little chimes go off, and we're listening to the tape. Those chimes never appear, so clearly something had happened there. And as this happens, Hanlon just sort of grits his teeth, and the tape winds down, and the episode fades out, and he's been caught, and that is the episode. What'd you think, Mikey?
I thought it was a really fun episode.
Fun is the way to describe it.
Yeah, it's almost a little silly in some ways and almost a bit cartoony, but it's a really great cast in this one. Robert Culp is even better than he was before. Fun, a lot of fun guest stars here, Dean Stockman and everything like that. Oof. Again, just these moments, right? Look, he did it again. Him eating that ice cream cone on the way back from murdering somebody. It's a very, very easy episode to watch.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely one where as I'm watching it, the fun that everyone's having, like it's a fun one to watch. You could tell everyone that's making it is having a good time. Peter Falk is like really getting into his own with those ad libs and poking the other actors and keeping them on their toes. And you get that sense that there's just a buoyancy to making this show at this point. They have hit their stride fully a long time ago, and now they are sort of exploiting that, and that comes through in this episode. So I don't hone in on the things where it's like, man, I get Columbo is very observant, but when things like that happen in my life, I feel like, okay, I'm looking, like for example, like I was just thinking about this tonight, that my power went off because we had that storm, and I was like trying to like piece together, like, okay, I thought I reset the time in my oven, and I look at it and it's like, oh, it says like 5:45 p.m. and I look over at the clock that is like connected to the internet, and it says like 7:45 p.m. and I'm like, did the clock on the oven go out right on top of the hour, or is something else happening there? And my brain's like trying to like piece these things together to figure out like that small little inconsequential puzzle. But it's like, there's so many variables in that. Like, I don't know what happens when this oven restarts and all this stuff that I can't account for, that Columbo always does account for. But that's what makes the show fun, is I want him to exist in a world where, one, he can account for all those things, and I want him to be superhuman to the point where he is like, he stumbles on a couple things here or there, but ultimately I want him to be able to connect the dots, because that's what makes the show satisfying in a way that real life is not. So when it's like, sometimes in this episode, it feels like a bit too convenient or a bit like magical, but it never to the point where I was like, I was thinking more about that than how much fun I was having. That's why it's important that they sort of have that confidence, because it makes the whole thing work. And I think that's really happening in this episode.
And it was very satisfying, the kind of the classic, it's a small little detail that throws Columbo off initially or gets him thinking something else is going on here. It's that hose water that gets him going, and then we just kind of see that build and build and build to the cuckoo clock as the thing that finally puts the nail in the coffin. And in the middle, there's like these, the lives and the conflicts of these other characters, the lawyer and the wife, and like how that is kind of playing here. Then the escort, right? That's kind of the real wild card here that starts to really bring it all together. And again, that is just such a fun, wacky, it's just putting Columbo in situations like that, right, is a lot of fun of the show.
And then having him say the right things, just say, I'm not here to hurt you. Again, I really like that line. It's like, that's the right thing to say to that person in that moment, to recognize that, like, I understand what you're feeling. So I appreciate, that's just good writing. I do think the host thing is a clever one, because when you think about it, it's like, okay, there was no one else there. We established a bunch of times that he was alone up until the time the delivery boy got there. It would be completely insane to expect the delivery boy or the neighbor to start spraying a hose for no reason. So why was the hose being sprayed? Like, Eric Wagner, would he even want to use a hose ever? Like, is it maybe he was refilling the pool? It's like, no, this pool water is like warm and chlorinated and all this stuff. So someone did this for a reason, and the most likely explanation is there was someone here that is trying to hide something, and building everything off of that is really fun. So again, they get the building blocks right usually on this show, and this is a good example of that. And then from there, being able to extrapolate and have a lot of fun with, okay, well, how's the path going to wind him towards catching this guy? This was a really good example of them having confidence to be able to nail that. All right, so what else we do on the show? We rank the episodes. We have Suitable for Framing at the top, Deadweight at the bottom. In between there, we have Murder by the Book, Etude in Black, Lady in Waiting, Blueprint for Murder, The Greenhouse Jungle, Death Lends a Hand, and Short Fuse. And that was in descending order. Where you feel good about this one? Because I'm like definitely like middle of the pack, at least, I think, for me.
Middle, maybe upper middle. I definitely like it more than Greenhouse Jungle, the previous episode.
I do
better
too.
than Etude in Black? It's probably not better than Etude Black, the season opener.
Right.
So what's in between Etude in Black and Greenhouse Jungle?
Okay, so we have between those though we have Lady in Waiting and Blueprint for Murder. So do you want to put it above Lady in Waiting?
Lady in Waiting. Ooh, Lady in Waiting. Is that? Oh, that's the one with freaking Leslie Nielsen in it. It's funny because it's probably not like a better episode yet. I think it's more fun. I think I ultimately like it better than Lady in Waiting.
Yeah, they're really close. They actually occupy a similar space for me, but I think we can put it above Lady in Waiting and right behind Etude in Black. That sounds right to me. Okay. What was the name of this episode again? The
most crucial game.
The most crucial game.
Not the crucial list game. That's not a word. The most crucial
The most crucial game. All right. That puts it at number 4 on our list right now. So
it's
that
fun.
Sounds about right.
Are we still doing like a season? How are we doing this? Like a season Mount Rushmore of killers?
Yes, I think we're doing a season Mount Rushmore of killers. So we had Jarvis Goodland from the last one. So that means right now we would put up automatically Paul Hanlon would go up there for now. But do you want to put him above Jarvis Goodland or behind?
I think he's definitely our best killer of the season so far.
Okay, all right. So that means we have Paul Hanlon above Jarvis Goodland. And as a reminder for people, for the first season, our three-headed Mount Rushmore was Dale Kingston, Ken Franklin, and Beth Chadwick. And Ken Franklin from Murder by the Book, and Dale Kingston was from Suitable for Framing, right? I think that's right. And then Beth Chadwick must have been from Lady in Waiting, or...
Yes, Lady in Waiting.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
There we go. All right. You know what? I'm going to write the names of these titles next to these killers so I can keep track of that in the future. Most Crucial Game and Etude in Black. All right. Mike, that does it for this episode. What can we expect from the next episode of Columbo?
It's a wacky one. Wackier than this, even. Dagger of the Mind. Columbo's going to England.
What?
It's an isekai. It's
What is this, an isekai?
Yeah, I watched this episode not too long ago. These are the most. These killers are something. These kids they're like Shakespeare theater actors.
Oh hell yeah! Okay, I'm very excited. Give me the goofs.
It's a lot on this one, so please be excited.
Please be excited, everybody, and we'll have that probably about a month from now. The schedule is more hectic than it's ever been for us, for both of us, and this is the time of the year where travel kicks back up, and we're both traveling a lot over the next few weeks.
Isekai to Germany very
soon. Yep,
so.
I'll isekai myself maybe over to the Grand Canyon here pretty soon, in fact. So a lot happening, but we will try to keep on top of the schedule as best we can. Shout out to Christian. He's pretty good taskmaster about cracking the whip and keeping us on top of this, which we appreciate. Yes. So thank you everybody for listening. Columbro, thanks for hanging out with me and talking about Columbo, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a good time. I really enjoyed this one. Thank you, Columbro.
Till next time, have a good one. Take care of yourself. Goodbye.